Chapter 5 Abraham, Part 3 of the Legends of the Jews, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Legends of the Jews, Volume 1, by Rabbi Louis Ginzberg. Abraham emigrates to Haran. For a period of 2 years, Abraham could devote himself undisturbed to his chosen task of turning the hearts of men to God and his teachings. In his pious undertakings he was aided by his wife Sarah, whom he had married in the meantime. While he exhorted the men and sought to convert them, Sarah addressed herself to the women. She was a helpmeet worthy of Abraham. Indeed, in prophetical powers she ranked higher than her husband. She was sometimes called Iscah, the seer, on that account. At the expiration of 2 years it happened that Nimrod dreamed a dream. In his dream he found himself with his army near the fiery furnace in the valley into which Abraham had been cast. A man resembling Abraham stepped out of the furnace, and he ran after the king with drawn sword, the king fleeing before him in terror. While running, the pursuer threw an egg at Nimrod's head, and a mighty stream issued therefrom, wherein the king's whole host was drowned. The king alone survived, with 3 men. When Nimrod examined his companions, he observed that they wore royal attire, and in form and stature they resembled himself. The stream changed back into an egg again, and a little chick broke forth from it, and it flew up, settled upon the head of the king, and put out one of his eyes. The king was confounded in his sleep, and when he awoke, his heart beat like a trip-hammer, and his fear was exceedingly great. In the morning, when he arose, he sent and called for his wise men and his magicians, and told them his dream. One of his wise men, Anoko by name, stood up and said, "Know, O king, this dream points to the misfortune which Abraham and his descendants will bring upon thee. A time will come when he and his followers will make war upon thy army, and they will annihilate it. Thou and the 3 kings, thy allies, will be the only ones to escape death. But later thou wilt lose thy life at the hands of one of the descendants of Abraham. Consider, O king, that thy wise men read this fate of thine in the stars 52 years ago at the birth of Abraham. As long as Abraham liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be stablished, nor thy kingdom." Nimrod took Anoko's words to heart, and dispatched some of his servants to seize Abraham and kill him. It happened that Eliezer, the slave whom Abraham had received as a present from Nimrod, was at that time at the royal court. With great haste he sped to Abraham to induce him to flee before the king's bailiffs. His master accepted his advice, and took refuge in the house of Noah and Shem, where he lay in hiding a whole month. The king's officers reported that despite zealous efforts Abraham was nowhere to be found. Thenceforth the king did not concern himself about Abraham. When Terah visited his son in his hiding place, Abraham proposed that they leave the land and take up their abode in Canaan, in order to escape the pursuit of Nimrod. He said, "Consider that it was not for thy sake that Nimrod overloaded thee with honors, but for his own profit. Though he continued to confer the greatest benefactions on thee, what are they but earthly vanity? For riches and professions profit not in the day of wrath and fury. Hearken unto my voice, O my father, let us depart for the land of Canaan, and serve the God that hath created thee, that it may be well with thee." Noah and Shem aided and abetted the efforts of Abraham to persuade Terah, whereupon Terah consented to leave his country, and he and Abraham and Lot, the son of Haran, departed for Haran with their households. They found the land pleasant, and also the inhabitants thereof, who readily yielded to the influence of Abraham's humane spirit and his piety. Many of them obeyed his precepts and became God-fearing and good. Terah's resolve to quit his native land for the sake of Abraham and take up his abode in strange parts, and his impulse to do it before even the divine call visited Abraham himself, this the Lord accounted a great merit unto Terah, and he was permitted to see his son Abraham rule as king over the whole world. For when the miracle happened, and Isaac was born unto his aged parents, the whole world repaired to Abraham and Sarah, and demanded to know what they had done that so great a thing should be accomplished for them. Abraham told them that all that had happened between Nimrod and himself, how he had been ready to be burnt for the glory of God, and how the Lord had rescued him from the flames. In token of their admiration for Abraham and his teachings, they appointed him to be their king, and in commemoration of Isaac's wondrous birth, the money coined by Abraham bore the figures of an aged husband and wife on the obverse side, and of a young man and his wife on the reverse side, for Abraham and Sarah both were rejuvenated at the birth of Isaac. Abraham's white hair turned black, and the lines in Sarah's face were smoothed out. For many years Terah continued to live a witness of his son's glory, for his death did not occur until Isaac was a youth of 35. And a still greater reward waited upon his good deed. God accepted his repentance, and when he departed this life, he entered into paradise, and not into hell, though he had passed the larger number of his days in sin. Indeed, it had been his fault that Abraham came near losing his life at the hands of Nimrod. The Star in the East. Terah had been a high official at the court of Nimrod, and he was held in great consideration by the king and his suite. A son was born unto him whom he called Abram, because the king had raised him to an exalted place. In the night of Abraham's birth, the astrologers and the wise men of Nimrod came to the house of Terah, and ate and drank, and rejoiced with him that night. When they left the house, they lifted up their eyes toward heaven to look at the stars, and they saw, and behold, one great star came from the east, and ran athwart the heavens, and swallowed up the 4 stars at the 4 corners. They all were astonished at the sight, but they understood this matter, and knew its import. They said to one another, This only betokens that the child that had been born unto Terah this night will grow up and be fruitful, and he will multiply and possess all the earth, he and his children forever, and he and his seed will slay great kings, and inherit their lands. They went home that night, and in the morning they rose up early, and assembled in their meeting house. They spake, and said unto one another, Lo, the sight that we saw last night is hidden from the king. It has not been made known to him, and should this thing become known to him in the latter days, he will say to us, Why did you conceal this matter from me? And then we shall all suffer death. Now let us go and tell the king the sight which we saw, and the interpretation thereof, and we shall be clear from this thing. And they went to the king and told him the sight they had seen, and their interpretation thereof, and they added the advice that he pay the value of the child to Terah, and slay the babe. Accordingly the king sent for Terah, and when he came, he spoke to him. It hath been told unto me that a son was born to thee yesternight, and a wondrous sign was observed in the heavens at his birth. Now give me the boy, that we may slay him before evil comes upon us from him, and I will give thee thy house full of silver and gold in exchange for him. Terah answered, This thing which thou promisest unto me is like the words which a man spoke to a mule, saying, I will give thee a great heap of barley, a house thereof, on condition that I cut off thy head. The mule replied, Of what use will all the barley be to me, if thou cuttest off my head? Who will eat it when thou givest it to me? Thus also I do say, What shall I do with silver and gold after the death of my son? Who shall inherit me? But when Terah saw how the king's anger burned within him at these words, he added, Whatever the king desireth to do unto his servant, that let him do. Even my son is at the king's disposal, without value or exchange, he and his 2 older brethren. The king spake, however, saying, I will purchase thy youngest son for a price. And Terah made answer, Let my king give me 3 days' time to consider the matter and consult about it with my family. The king agreed to this condition, and on the 3rd day he sent to Terah, saying, Give me thy son for a price, as I spoke unto thee. If thou wilt not do this, I will send and slay all thou hast in thy house. There shall not be a dog left unto thee. Then Terah took the child which his handmaid had borne unto him that day, and he brought the babe to the king, and received value for him, and the king took the child and dashed his head against the ground, for he thought it was Abraham. But Terah took his son Abraham, together with the child's mother and his nurse, and concealed them in a cave, and thither he carried provisions to them once a month. And the Lord was with Abraham in the cave, and he grew up, but the king and all his servants thought that Abraham was dead. And when Abraham was 10 years old, he and his mother and his nurse went out from the cave, For the king and his